I want you to imagine this scenario. You spent 3 months finding the right business. You've reviewed the financials. You verified the SDE. You've negotiated a fair price. You've signed the purchase agreement. You told your family and friends. You maybe even have turned in your notice with your current employer and told them that you're making a move. And then 2 weeks before the close of the deal, the landlord says, no, not to the price, not to the terms of the sale, to you as the new tenant. The landlord reviews the lease assignment request, decides they don't want you as their new owner operator in that space, and they exercise their legal right to deny you the transfer. Your deal is dead. Your earnest money is gone. Your attorney's fees are gone. The 3 months you spent founding this deal, investigating this deal, is gone, and you're starting over. Hey, this is not an hypothetical. It happens. It happens a lot. And it happens most exclusively to buyers who didn't read the lease before they made the offer. I'm Jason Schmidt, a CPA, and I advise business buyers under $500,000 on the financial and operational realities that brokers don't ever put in their listings. In this series, we've covered what brokers aren't required to tell you, how the SDE gets manipulated, and how 5 questions expose a bad deal early. Today, we're going to go into the document that most buyers treat like, well, an afterthought, really, and that can legally end up ending your deal, ending your purchase, even after you've signed the contract. Here's why this happens so consistently. When a buyer is evaluating a business, their attention is on the income statement. Revenue, expenses, profit, SDE, valuation. Those numbers are numbers that determine whether the deal makes financial sense. The lease sits in a separate folder. But it's a legal document, right? Most buyers figure their attorney will look at it during the due diligence. And technically, that's correct, and it should be. But here's the timing problem. Most buyers don't request the lease until after they made an offer. They've already told the seller they're interested. They've already negotiated a price. They're emotionally tied to the deal. And then they discover something in the lease that should have changed whether they made the offer or what the selling price was. Getting the lease reviewed before you make an offer is not overcautious. It's the only way to protect your negotiating positions. Once your offer is accepted and you're in due diligence, you pretty much lost leverage. The seller knows you're committed. Walking away has a cost. The time to know what's in the lease is before you create that dynamic, not after. Let's go through the 4 lease provisions that matter most to business buyers. These are things I see all the time. The first is the assignment clause. An assignment clause governs what happens to the lease when ownership of the business changes hands. In plain English, when you buy a business, does the lease automatically transfer to you, or does the landlord have to approve the transfer first? Most commercial leases require landlord consent on any assignment. That means the landlord has the right to review you as a potential tenant and your financial history, your business background, your credit worthiness, and decide whether they approve you or deny you the transfer. Some landlords are very straightforward. If you're a qualified buyer with solid finances, they approve you and move on. But some landlords see a business sale as an opportunity to renegotiate, an opportunity to significantly raise the rent, an opportunity to change the terms of the lease to something more favorable to them and less favorable to you. Here's what you need to know before you make an offer. What does the assignment clause say? And what is the landlord's history of dealing with business sales in this location, right? A good commercial real estate attorney or a CPA who knows what to look for can tell you within an hour of viewing that clause what your risk level is. If the assignment clause requires landlord consent and you have not spoken to the landlord before making your offer, you are buying a business with a contingency you have not controlled. Something that you haven't prepared for. Okay, the second provision is a personal guarantee. This is a good one. When the business owner signs a commercial lease, the landlord often requires a personal guarantee. That means if the business fails to pay rent, The owner is personally responsible, not just the business entity. I don't care if you got an LLC or not, you're on the hook for the rent. Here's the question almost nobody asks when buying a business. Does that personal guarantee transfer to you at closing? In many cases, the answer is absolutely yes. When you take over the lease, you may be signing a personal guarantee as the new tenant. That means your personal assets, your home, your savings, your personal credit are all on the line if the business hits a rough patch and you can't make rent. This is not a reason automatically to walk away from the deal because the majority of them will require you to have a personal guarantee. Personal guarantees are common in commercial real estate, and many legitimate purchases actually involve them. But you need to know the full terms of the guarantee, whether there's a cap on your personal liability, and whether the seller is being released from their guarantee at the same time you're signing yours. The scenario you want to avoid: signing a personal guarantee on a 10-year lease for a business that has 7 years remaining without understanding that you are now personally responsible for potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent obligations if the business fails. Let me tell you, you need to know what you're signing before you sign it. The third provision is the old rent escalation clause. A rent escalation clause defines how much rent can increase over the life of the lease and under what conditions. The most common form is a fixed annual lease, typically with a 3 to 5% increase per year, right? Others are tied to the consumer price index or just based on inflation. Now, let me tell you, here's why this matters to your financial model. When you're evaluating a business, you're looking at today's cash flow, but you're buying tomorrow's business. If the rent increases 3% per year on a $6,000 per month lease, your rent in 5 years is roughly $6,960 per month. An additional $11,520 per year in expenses you need to account for. If the business revenue grows the same rate, no problem. But if you're buying a business in a market where the revenue is flat or slowly growing, a rent escalation clause on a fixed schedule, your margins are being compressed every year automatically, whether you do anything right or whether you do anything wrong. The math question to ask before any offer: if rent escalates at the contracted rate for the remaining term of the lease, what does my profit look like in 3 to 5 years? Does this business still make financial sense at that point? The fourth provision is the expiration of the lease. When is this going to expire, and what are the renewal options? This one is deceptively simple and absolutely deceptively dangerous. A business with 18 months left on its lease is not worth the same as a business with 7 years remaining. In many cases, it's not worth buying, period, because the value of the location-dependent business is directly tied to the security of its lease. When a laundromat, car wash, retail service business has a short lease remaining, you face 2 risks. First, the landlord may not renew at all. They may have plans to redevelop, bring some different tenant in, or even sell the property. You could lose your deal spending 18 months in the building business and then lose your entire location. Second, the landlord knows the lease is expiring. They hold all the leverage in renewal negotiations. They can demand significantly higher rent, knowing you've already invested in the location. And the alternative is absolutely starting over. Renewal options are what protects you from this. A well-structured lease has renewal options that give the tenant the right, not the obligation, to extend the lease at predetermined times. If the current lease has 2 5-year renewal options at defined escalation rates, you have 11 years of location security to build on. If it has no renewal options and 18 months remaining, you have a business sitting on a ticking clock. Before you make any offer, find out the expiration date, what renewal options exist, and what terms those options can be exercised. All right, here's your practical framework. We do this in every video. Before you make an offer on any location-dependent business, request a full copy of the lease, not a summary, the actual document. Have two things happen with that document. First, have a commercial real estate attorney or a CPA who understands lease structures review the 4 provisions I just walked you through: assignment clause, personal guarantee, rent escalation, expiration, and renewal options. Second, factor what you find into your offer price. A business with a difficult assignment clause, a heavy personal guarantee, a 3% annual escalation for only 24 months remaining on a lease is worth less than the broker's asking price. Those lease conditions are risk factors. Risk factors lower valuation. Use them in negotiation, not as a reason to panic, but as a legitimate basis for adjusting what you pay. The business buyer who reads the lease before making an offer goes into negotiation with information. The buyer who reads it during due diligence goes into negotiation already committed. The difference in timing is often the difference between a fair deal and a very expensive mistake. Now, business buyer red flag scorecard. I mentioned it in the last video. I'm mentioning it again now. It's a very good scorecard to give you a brief rundown, an initial look at buying a business. The link is down in the description. Go get it. It's free. And if you're currently looking at a specific business and want to talk to somebody and have a CPA look at it before you make an offer, join for free the Firewatch Business Lab on school.com. The link to that is also down below. We can have a conversation, just me and you. It could save you thousands of dollars. Listen, the lease is a legal foundation your business sits on. Get it wrong, and everything built on top of that is just risk, regardless how good the financials look. In the next video, we're going to go through the due diligence checklist. And if you want to see it, you can click it right here. It's not about finding a deal. It's about avoiding a bad one.